House does not appear to be playing favorites when it comes to disaster relief, giving one ruby red state somewhat of the cold shoulder, at least so far. Arkansas is currently dealing with the aftermath of storms that took 3 lives, injured dozens, and caused billions in damage in March. But the administration has turned down multiple requests to declare a major disaster, saying the damage wasn't severe enough to require federal assistance. They also said the state was capable of handling it. Now, remember, this is what President Trump said about disaster recovery in his first few days in office when he visited North Carolina in January.
FEMA just hasn't done the job, and we're looking at the whole concept of FEMA. I like, frankly, the concept when North Carolina gets hit, the governor takes care of it. When Florida gets hit, the governor takes care of it, meaning the state takes care of it.
Now, the Arkansas governor, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, the president's former press secretary in his first administration, penning a 17-page letter to her former boss, asking for help, saying in part, quote, "I respectfully ask that you consider the significant strain the citizens of Arkansas have endured over the past month," end quote. She has since appealed the denial of federal aid. Now, the state's entire congressional Republican delegation followed up, also urging the president's administration to reconsider. Governor Sanders appearing a little bit more optimistic in an interview today, saying, quote, "We expect this to be processed quickly, and we've provided additional and extra information that bolsters the need. At the end of the day, though, I've talked to the president, I've talked to Secretary Noem. We want to make sure that the people are taken care of." So what's at play here? Arkansas has been granted an emergency declaration, which provides up to $5 million in aid. Major disaster declarations, on the other hand, do not have a fixed limit for federal assistance. So far this year, there have been 11 major disaster declarations issued across 9 different states, including in California, for those wildfires. Now, when it comes to emergency declarations in 2025, there have been 4 across 3 states this year, all having to do with severe storms, tornadoes, and flooding. With me now, a man who knows a thing or two about this, the former head of FEMA under President George W. Bush, Michael Brown. Michael, it is nice to have you back here on the Hill once again.
You bet. Likewise. Good to see you.
You as well. So this is an interesting one for a lot of reasons, right? At the headline, you've got the president and his former press secretary, the former press secretary saying, look, help us out here in Arkansas. I just kind of laid out there sort of the different levels of aid as you see it. As the former head of FEMA, how do you look at this one tonight?
Well, let's look at it, in D.C. speak, let's look at it from a 30,000-foot level.
Okay.
What the president is saying and what he said back at the beginning in that bit that you played, he's absolutely correct. It's the responsibility of the states first and foremost. And what we've done over the course, well, since 1979, and it's progressively gotten worse and worse, is states have become more and more dependent upon the federal government anytime there's a natural disaster of any size, large or small. So I think what the president is trying to balance 2 things. He's trying to wean the states off FEMA so that they're not, just automatically expecting the feds to step in and pay for everything. At the same time, you can't just cut them off entirely. You've got to wean them off. And the Governor Huckabee, I've read her letter. I listened to a couple of interviews that she's done. She knows what the process is, that there's usually an initial denial, and the FEMA will say, here are the figures we have in terms of damage assessments and everything else. And then they have to show that that is way beyond their capacity. And I'm sure she's had people in the field assessing that so they can show the president, look, we can't afford this. Which, may or may not be true because I don't have those numbers yet. But once that appeal process is completed, if they get additional information, he will probably declare a disaster and they will get some money.
So you think
that's where the bottom line is, at some point, we do have to start reining it in because it is out of control.
So let me ask you about that, because the president sort of, it feels like, and correct me if I'm wrong, that we're maybe in a transition period or possibly getting there, where the president has basically said, you know what, we want to put FEMA back in the control, or at least the handling of this, back in control of the states. It almost sounds like, Michael, that this is kind of what Republicans want to do with the education department and block grants back to the states.
Exactly, because you think about what FEMA has in 1979. FEMA was designed to take over the old civil defense authorities, which were, kind of the black ops programs about continuity of government and continuity of operations. And then it started expanding to disaster relief. And then that grew and grew and grew. And the more it grew, the more states became dependent upon the feds to step in. So that by the time I was FEMA director, it was virtually, we tried to turn down a few things, but the governors would appeal. And of course, President Bush would capitulate despite what our recommendation might be. And we would end up declaring it a disaster.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.